Thank you so much, Aya, for having me. I am doing fantastic. I'm doing very well, and I'm extremely humbled to be on this podcast and being extremely gracious as well.
In 3 words, who is Luthando?
I am a protector and I am a mother.
Tell me, how powerful is the vagina?
So, when I think I was in primary school. I'm going to take it back a bit. I stumbled upon something called the vagina monologues. And my aunt was in varsity at the time, and she was consuming the books and, the theater productions. And I was so interested, what is this concept of vagina monologue? And I then started doing drama. And for one of our monologues, I remember asking my drama teacher, can I do, this thing? And she's like, it's a Catholic school, so I don't think it's going to be, really accepted, but let's try see how we can do it. And I then did my own vagina monologue, my own version of a vagina monologue, but then I kind of started seeing like the disconnect between the vagina and the body as Black women, and then everything else around it, and how just the vagina is always under attack. Yes, your body's under attack, but it's the source, this place where life comes from. It is just constantly under attack. And I've never understood why this is. And I think I've spent most of my life, even recalling the poetry I used to write as a child and as a teenager, it was surrounded around the body of the woman, how it functions, what it does, why is it under attack, what life it brings. And it's been, I suppose, one of my mandates also as a survivor to protect it, because, the vagina, the womb, it's all, it's like a passage. It's a passage where magic happens. It's a passage that needs to be protected.
I want to know, how did you grow up in South Africa? How were you as a kid? What did you study?
So one of the recollections I have about growing up is how my father came home and he was bleeding. His shirt was drenched in blood and he'd been stabbed behind the ear at the train station coming back from town where he had his office. And at the time, we had like an invisible hand that was involved in the apartheid regime, where now we saw just wars of tribalism. And in the area that we lived, in the township that we lived at the time, which was Tembisa in Tambega, we had a hostel that had Zulu people living there. And, so it kind of, something happened, one thing led to the next, and my father landed up at home bleeding. And my grandfather was so upset, so he grabbed an axe and, he called a neighbor and they left. And then they came back hours later, Obviously, I don't know what happened, but my grandfather was really, really upset. And it was that decision then that, we moved to the suburbs in 1991. And moving to the suburbs wasn't really different because we were exposed to white schools. Even though we're living in the township, we were privileged enough to be able to attend Model C schools. And in fact, I attended a private school. And so did most members of my family. And but we were the only Black family in the street in the specific suburb. So it was also kind of tricky, Then 1994, we have democracy, and it's an absolutely beautiful thing at the time. Yes, there's TRC commissions that begin, there's a burning of Shah House, like 2 years later. But my childhood, generally, besides the apartheid trauma, which we don't really speak about, was lovely. I was raised in the church. I went to a Catholic school. I had a beautiful young mother who was hip, and happening. My father was a Harvard graduate. Everything looked like it was coming up for us. And it's funny that I speak of my childhood like this, but it was also at that same time that I was being molested by a family member, And I think I don't really necessarily associate pain with that era because I loved this person as well. And you're a child, you love this family member, you know what they're doing is wrong. And I think I realized what they're doing was wrong when they would threaten me with my grandfather, because my grandfather, being the head of a church, also very strict. So this person would say to me, if you tell that I did this, I'll tell your grandfather and, he'll punish you. And I feared my grandfather. I revered my grandfather. And so I was just like, no, okay. And eventually this came to a stop when this person then moved out of our household. And it was just now my aunt, my grandfather, and my grandmother and myself. And my aunt and I went to the same school. She was in grade 11, and I saw Form 4. She was in Form 4 at the time, 1995, when I was at grade 1, and I was in grade 1. But we had that, and it was the school that we went to. It was an all-girls school. So from when I was very young, besides at home being raised by just female warriors and people who were just very conscious and woke of not only politics, but what it is to be free and work as a woman and have rights, I then enter this all-girls school that instills that in us, independence from the word go, self-sufficiency, being your own person. But also, at the same time, there's racism that I encounter, and serious, severe racism, And as a child, you're doing school, you're trying very hard, you're doing life in the New South Africa, and no one's really giving you a guide of how to deal with racism. And then also at the back of your mind, in retrospect, when you kind of look at it, a lot of the people that I know, the young people, the young women, my peers, were sexually molested as well, all around about that time, at that age. So we're dealing with all these things. But it was a lovely upbringing nonetheless. Continued into high school at this all-girls school, went to varsity, the University of Pretoria. I studied politics. I studied BCom law. I studied journalism. And I never finished. I always chop and change. And I studied theology even, and I was speaking to a parliamentarian recently, and they were asking, why do you think you didn't complete any of your studies? And I said, because I think I went to varsity not to find a job, but I went to varsity so I could understand and have a broader understanding of what we're being taught, how we're applying it in life, and just life in general. Because when you get to university, there's so many people you meet. It's so diverse, especially in Pretoria. And it being also exposed to different religions and different ways of doing things. It was really an enriching experience for me. And also the things that I was involved in. I was a member of RAG, which is Reach Out and Give. And it was just, varsity was also great. But also then in varsity, there were these incidences of, rape. And it's almost like, in as much as you try, you can't escape them. I can't say at some point I was out, with this incident in varsity. It happened in my space, on my turf. No alcohol involved, just sober, and these things keep on happening. And I dealt with it as I do, but I don't think I dealt with it correctly. I mean, my best friend and I tried to start an organization called it was like an NPO, an organization for females. And we decided that we are going to start this organization where we help women and young women realize that, they have worth. It's called Flawsome. Yes, I remember. So you're flawed, but you're awesome. And just so that, things happen to you and they've happened to you, but it's okay. You can prevail. You can do something after that. You don't have to stay in that situation.
Take us through your experience, but also the different age bracket that you went through. I know also in high school there were another incident that happened, and then later on. So, but in every stage, like how was it different, or how was it similar? And I'm sure you now have kind of a profile of the abuser, right? What abuser looks like and what strategies they use. The same way this person in the family was blaming you for it. I tell your grandfather, right? That's like the manipulator strategy to put the blame back on you, to feel guilty for something that, absolutely is the responsibility of the perpetrator. So please do share with us.
No. You're very correct in your description of the abuser, and I will start with my journey. So when I was first molested, I always say between the ages of 3 and 5, 2 and 5 actually, and it was this relative. And when I have the flashbacks and I remember the incidences, it would be this person, climbing on top of me and then muzzling rather my mouth with his hand, and then forcing his organ, trying to force it inside of me. And obviously then failing, just rubbing it, on my genitals. And until then, whatever relief they felt, and then they'd stop. And then they'd give me these coins. And then when, I think I'd have this look of probably, resentment or whatever in my face. And then that's when they'll tell my grandfather. And this happened when we're still living in the township, and then we moved to the suburbs, and it's continued to happen. And the one memory that's so clear to me is that this person hadn't been around for a very long time. And then once, it was a Saturday afternoon. One Saturday afternoon, they arrived, and during the course of the day, this thing happened. But I think what I think about now is the guts that they had, because it happened on the front lawn. And generally at home, our doors are opened, right? But it was on the front lawn, and this person was on top of me, and they pinned themselves against me, and also still blocking my mouth so I don't scream, and trying now and attempting to do this thing. But obviously they didn't take their genitalia and their parts out, but they were just, I suppose, dry humping me. And it never ever happened after that, ever again. And then they permanently left our home and never returned. So that's how it stopped. Then a couple of years later, I used to stay at a family member's house after school. And it was right opposite a primary school. And this family member, they used to run a business that supported the community, supported the students and neighbors. And this person was such a loving member of society, and how just they helped everyone around, And I had this group of friends. I was the only girl, and it was this group of friends of boys. But every time I'd come home after school and get changed, these group of boys would come into the house. And because they knew that no one was in the house, they were all focused on the shop outside, because that's what you do. You come back from school, you get changed, and then you enter the business. You peel the potatoes, you do what you have to do, you serve the customers. And they'd come into the house, these boys, and as I'm getting changed, they'd all, take their genitalia out and start rubbing against me, all of them simultaneously, and surrounding me. And then they'd sing the song, loosely translated. It's my name, actually, my home name. Gunchu, darling, do you see this thing? It's going to, loosely translated, it's going to tear your vagina apart, and it's an African language. And just one day, and I think I tolerated it because I just felt like I was a girl, and there's nothing I could do about it. And I don't want to tell on these boys, because some of them are kind of like family relatives, their neighbors' kids, people I grew up with. But eventually I remember coming home and saying to my grandmother, I don't want to stay at this house anymore after school. I'm rather more comfortable with staying where it's just girls, and which I did. And I started staying at another grandmother's house after school, and it was just girls, and I felt safe there. And I was fine there. And I think I stayed there up until I then I was at an age where I could come home and be on my own. I was old enough to take care of myself, like 12, 13. So from school, come straight home, make my own lunch, didn't really need someone to look after me. And that was a journey. Then when I was in grade 9, Christmas Eve, I'll never forget, Christmas Eve, one of my friends came to visit, and he was much older than me. We had met when I was in the 8th grade. When I was in the 8th grade, he was in matric, and he wanted to date. And I think we both realized that it didn't make sense. I was so young, and he was just so much older. So then I would just treat him as an older brother. And for the longest time, we had that kind of friendship where he's like an older brother, to the point where the helper at home knew him and would always welcome him with open arms, because it's like, oh, you're one of us, kind of. And one day, Christmas Eve, he came over, and he was about to leave, and he was sitting in my bedroom, like we'd normally do. I'd be sitting on my bed, and I had a chair in front of my bed, and he'd be sitting there and be talking. But this time it was different, you know. He climbed on top of me. It was very quick. Climbed on top of me, pinned himself, on top of me as well on the bed. And I remember asking him, like, what are you doing? And he said to me, he's like, I thought this is what you've always wanted. And I'm like, why would I want this? You're my friend. And I was like, please stop. And he's like, no. And he just continued. And I remember just looking to the side and deciding that I'm not going to fight. It's too sore. And I really feel overpowered right now at this point. And, my face faced the other way. And when he was done, I was bleeding, obviously. And he was like, I didn't realize. And I'm like, what didn't you realize? I told you. Why would you think I was lying? And I remember locking myself up in the bathroom, and he was knocking on the door profusely. And then my brother was on the property actually at the time. And then my brother came, and I kept quiet, and he just left. And I never saw him ever again after that. And then this was grade 9 now. And then when I was in grade 11, my cousin and I went out because we used to like going out to dance. We used to love music. And we never used to drink. We're not consumers of alcohol because we knew that Sunday morning we had to be in church. As a child, my grandfather always warned me that this constant need to go out and be about at night is very dangerous because I'm going to get hurt one day, And then he'd always make examples of girls that grew up in the community and how they got hurt, some of them, how they died. And in my head, I was like, no, we're protected, we're fine, and we're pastors' kids. So the glory of God protects us. We're not doing anything naughty. Yes, we're sneaking out to go dance and come back, but we're protected. And, one night I learned that it wasn't really the case because we went out to a boyfriend's house and he had a friend there and they were doing their own thing. And I was sitting there with this gent. And also then this guy was just trying to do funny things. And I was like, no. And I remember I was on my period at the time. And then he forced himself on me, like he pinned me on the floor, and I fought. And I told him like I'm on my period. And then he pinned me down. And in my head, I thought to myself, not again. Is this honestly happening again? And is this guy really going to do this whilst I'm on my period? How disgusting is this? And I looked to the side and I cried, didn't make a noise. Tears came down on my face. And I remember when he was done, he gave me like tissue to wipe myself. And I got up and I went to go find my cousin and I told her what happened. And we immediately left. And I remember sitting there when it was early hours of the morning. And I'm like, I'm not going to sleep. Let's just like bath and get ready to go to church because we've got things to do. And we went to church on Sunday, but something broke in me that day. I stopped, how do I put it? I stopped caring or treasuring the body that I was in, My behavior changed and I found myself involved in little like spects of promiscuity at a very young age. And I stopped. I think it was like a year later after the incident. And I stopped because my cousin turned to me in church and she said to me, what's happened to you? What happened? This is not you, And I think for me, that was like a come to Jesus moment because it was like right in front of the pulpit and we're here and, we're at church. So I'm just like, okay, fine. I'm going to give my life back to God. I'm going to stop with this and I'm going to live a purpose-driven life. And for my birthday that year, I remember my aunt bought me the teenage version of Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. And I started reading that. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to change my life and I focus on my studies. What I do, I want to be a lawyer or a journalist or a politician. I want to advocate for the right things. I want to help girls like me. And the older I grew as well, the more I realized that more of my peers and my friends, personal friends, were actually going through this. And it didn't make sense. And I couldn't stop it. But in my head, I thought to myself, maybe we could build a community of some sorts. And I think that that's how the influencement comes about when I'm then in first year. And we try to work with power, whatever work that I also did with Reach Out and Give, I tried to focus it more on the GBV stuff. Like when I was raising money for RAG as a debutante, I was raising money for Power. So that was the journey. And then in varsity, there'd be times where I'd have gentlemen at my apartment who on campus, we talk, we're friends. They want to borrow a book because I've got a specific book that they've been looking for. And then they come in and they assume that something else is going to happen. And in my head, I remember asking the one guy, what makes you think that I invited you here for sex? You wanted a book. I had a book. I'm going to give you a book. It's done. Also, another relationship that I had in varsity where I was with was the weekend. My mother was pregnant and had lost my brother. And so we had buried him, and he was born a stillborn. And that weekend, I remember I came back to my apartment and I decided to myself, no, let me just be with other people instead of just being depressed, surrounded by four walls. And I went to go visit this person, and he also tried, but he was huge. So I literally felt flattened, suffocated, like I could not breathe. And had it not been for the girl in the next room, I don't know what would have happened that day. You know, the girl came in and she was like, what are you doing? And then she slept with me. And even the next day, when we're trying to explain to this guy what had happened, it didn't make sense to him. And I remember him asking, are you not going to go to the police station? So, yeah. So this has chain of, the incidences. And for a while, I thought, that it's past me. It's not something that happens. But what we don't realize as survivors and versus victims survivors is that there's an energy that you carry with you when you don't face the trauma of rape and sexual violence and abuse. And that energy actually attracts more negative energy. It attracts more of this violent, traumatic behavior. Was also very, very violent, extremely violent. And I was relaying a story the other day that one of the reasons why I never fought back, I fought back the first 2 times, but I didn't ever fight back, was because I realized I was going to kill him. And my daughter needed her parents. So she couldn't have one parent in jail and one parent dead. And I was just like, what, God, this is where I need divine intervention, because if I lay hands on this man, it's late for all of us. In fact, we might just walk away here, dead, and my child without parents at all. And I then got out of that by the grace of God, that phase of my life of, the beatings, the skewed face, the bumps in the head, some of the permanent bruises that I see my back sometimes, and I think to myself, oh yeah, those are marks from this and this and this. But I don't look at them as marks from being beaten. I look at them as I have the ability to look at these marks. I lived to see the day where I can tell the story of these marks. So these are just bruises of a warrior and a survivor, And I then, 2-3 years ago, I then went out with a friend, and that night I was drugged in a club, and I was raped, and I woke up in my car, and it was on my arms and between my thighs and on my legs, and I was bleeding. And funny enough, the first thing that I thought, because I when I came to consciousness and I was in my car, I remembered that I had bought my daughter Easter eggs because it was almost in time for Easter, and I'd be collecting Easter eggs for the Easter egg hunt, because she really wanted a major Easter egg hunt. And they were all squashed and smushed. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, whatever happened in this car has ruined my poor daughter's Easter eggs. And I remember being so furious. And then after the Easter eggs, I came back to myself and I thought to myself, okay, what do we do now? Okay, I've got the bruises, I've got the blood, I'm damaged. I can see that, I've been consuming alcohol. Will anyone believe me? What happens next? I walk out, I try to find help, and no help is to be found. and then there's police that come to the scene, but something says to me, don't go to the police. You know, the line of questioning, the way they're questioning me, it doesn't feel safe. In fact, I think these incidents, I'm going to be more unsafe than I already feel. The key now is to file keys and just get home and get to my mother and get to my family, who had been trying to call me the whole night. So I then get home, and my mother sees what's happening. I tell her what has happened. You know, I'm weak. She takes me to the nearest hospital, and the damage was so severe they couldn't get my legs to open. We had to wait for a while. They had to give me a sedative so I could stop screaming. And also the damage that had been done to my vagina was so severe that it was at the touch. You know, the doctor now examines you and is touching you. They couldn't even do that because at the touch of her hand, I would panic. I would scream. I'd go into shock. And then I was put on ARVs and all these other medications. I went to therapy, but only for 2 days, because I felt like I'm an adult. It's not the first time I've been raped. I think I kind of know how to handle these situations now. So I think I'm coming here to acknowledge what has happened, but I'm also coming to acknowledge that I don't have the time or capacity to deal with this right now, because I have a child to take care of, I have money to make, I have a business to run. But also not knowing, not realizing that not dealing with what has happened stop me from being a good mother, will stop me from doing business, will stop me and block me the money that I need to, because I'm sitting with this dark cloud. And it's in that year that I think a lot of things change for me, you know, and even the work projects I'm involved in. There's a crisis matter, my first crisis case that I handle, where a young lady accused an older gent in an organization of raping her, and that just woke me up to something else. That I can't be part of this. I don't claim to be a person who wants to put a change into certain things in society, yet here I am representing the wolves of society. That doesn't make sense. And I remember walking to a boardroom and saying to the board of this company that actually that which you want me to do, I'm not going to do. And this is the strategy which we're going to follow. And if you don't follow the strategy, one, I'm going to be out the door and no one is going to be able to help you, because no one has the insight into the company like I do and the actual victim. And number two, this is not that kind of organization, you know. This is an organization that claims to be feminist, so you must protect your women, you must protect yourselves as well. So what you've asked me to do, I'm not going to do. And I didn't. And I received a lot of backlash after that. But I was okay with it. And that was, I think, my first stand against atrocities, against the vile behavior of society and the vile behavior of leadership and the vile patriarchy. It's very vile, it's venomous, it's poison. And that was when I first took a stand, and I haven't turned my back ever since.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. How do you feel today?
Strong. I have moments of weakness. I have flashbacks. A lot of things trigger me: smells, places, light, dark. But you learn to navigate it. And I think I'm fortunate that I find myself now in a space where my support structure is solid. And I have chosen, I suppose, my healing not in the Western way where you go to therapy. I consult with religious leaders. I consult with spiritual healers. I consult with women in my circle. I consult with my grandmothers, my mother. You know, it's what I have been through, what women just generally go through. I don't consider it as a conversation for a certain time in a certain place. I make it a part of my life so that we're all healing every day. And I have moments of weakness, but I'm feeling stronger. I promised myself I wouldn't cry. But for me, the tears are, it's part of the purge.
The tears only shows how brave you are to tell a story from childhood to teenage to adulthood and to survive all of it. It's a true definition of braveness. It's a true definition of courage. And when you were talking, like every level, everything that happened at every stage, I'm wondering, that's why I asked, how do you do today? Like, how did you get the courage to tell your story, to actually make this something that strengthens you, to even start your own organization, to even have a platform and still be in the process of healing? Because that's what I'm hearing. That's the last thing happened 2 years ago. That's still a process of healing. And for you to be here, share the story, want to reach as many women and survivors as you can, where do you get that courage?
So for me, the courage comes from it's different places. So one, I've always understood that my purpose in this life, from when I was very young, is to empower those who have been disenfranchised. Because in as much as I am Black, I am a Black girl that was born into privilege in an unprivileged society. However, I realized at a very young age that I can use my privilege to help people. When I was younger, in grade 1, I used to teach other grade 1 kids how to speak English and write and do math, basic math. So I understood my journey. I understood my calling and my mandate in this life, and it is to help others. And when that is your mandate in this life, to help and to carry others and to make others' lives better, there is I don't know how to describe it, but there is something within me, and I get it, man. I usually say it's God, it's the Holy Spirit, but there is a burning thing inside of me, and it can't be put out, to constantly help in spite of myself and despite whatever situation that I'm in. I always say to people, being a martyr, there's nothing sexy about it, especially as Black women, right? Because a lot of us find ourselves in those positions of martyrdom. But with that being said, I have understood God's mandate for me in life and purpose. And I have taken that responsibility onto myself, and I have accepted it. You know, they usually say heavy is the head that wears the crown. I understand the crown that I am wearing. I understand that it might be heavy and at times it might slip from left to right, but that doesn't stop me from going. The slipping of the crown, and the slipping of the crown could be the abuses that I face, the bad that I do to people, willingly, unwillingly, consciously, unconsciously. But with all that happening, there's a crown that I need to wear, and I must continue. Because if I'm not wearing this crown, who else is going to do it? Who else is going to speak out? Who else is going to be brave? Because we know that many are not, and many have died wanting to be brave, and many can be stopped from committing suicide, and ending their lives, or even at some point being living corpses. If I can save just one black girl, and let her know that you can live beyond any situation, circumstance. You can be whatever it is that you want to be. It's going to take time. You're going to slip. You're going to fall. But if you believe in yourself, if you believe in the light that God has instilled in you, if you believe in your purpose and you stick to that and you're unwavering about it, you can do anything.
I concur with that 100%. And I think it's so important to also inspire other survivors to speak up, because the louder we are, the more girls we will save. I wanted to ask you this notion of protection, right? So Because it's a constant from the journey, it's a constant protection of the body, the vagina, right? When we advocate in gender-based and ending gender-based violence in these spaces, everything is about protection. But do women actually need protection? Is that the end goal? Are we fighting for protection?
So it's not fighting for protection. It's fighting so there is no need for us to be protected. I think that's my thing, because fighting for protection means that there is a thing that we need protecting from. But if that thing is not there, we don't need protection. So it's fighting against the action of gender-based violence, the action of rape. That is what we are doing. Not necessarily protection. Protection now must come as a byproduct because society is as disgusting and sick as it is. So unfortunately, we can't have little girls playing around and little boys, children being, allowing them to be themselves. Women can't be themselves. And therefore, because women cannot be themselves, they need protecting. Because there are these people on this earth who believe it is their God-given right to overpower women's bodies, to overpower little children, to do with them what they think.
Yes, to basically end the violence itself, so we don't have to protect women anymore. So I want you to give us, educate a little bit our listeners on what is happening in South Africa. So South Africa has the highest rates of gender-based violence in Africa, and some pretty alarming rates. Why do you think South Africa is struggling so much with handling this crisis? And I think it even doubled or more since COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes, during COVID, it did double. So, one of the things that I see is that it's a culture thing, and it's a patriarchal thing where certain people believe that it is their right, their divine right over us, our women's bodies, to do certain things to us, and we cannot say or speak out against them, because all of this really is a power. It's a power dance, and my country struggles with power dances. We have such terrible power struggles. I think in all facets of government and all facets of life, it's this power thing. So you have a group of people that have been disenfranchised and disempowered for such a long time, doing the same thing now to those whom they claim to love the most, or to the most vulnerable members of society. Hurt people hurting people. That's what it is. And because we, as a country, we haven't dealt with the true effects of colonialism, the true effects of apartheid. How I describe it is the effects of a raped land and a raped nation. We are a nation that has been mutilated, right? And we expect a mutilated nation to produce good crop, to produce good fruit. For me, that doesn't make sense. And you haven't worked on the healing of that nation, the healing of the soil, the healing of the water. We drink water from rivers where our ancestors' blood was shed. We live on land. We struggle with land. Just forget that we struggle with land. We live on blood-drenched soil. So I don't know, perhaps maybe I spiritualize a lot of things, and I speak in terms that are neither here or there at times. But I think for me, somebody had to make sense of this. Why would you want to live and continue living and producing on something which is soiled and not working at it being purified, and expecting the people of that nation, whether it's men or women, to produce good, to behave well, to behave like the land is good when the land has been violated? I'm not sure if you get me, Aya.
100%, 100%. I think it's extremely important that we root this conversation in colonialism, and in pre and post Africa in general. And I think that's extremely important, because then if that is taken out, that historical context is taken out, then how are we finding solutions that decolonize? Because it's not just patriarchy, right? It's
not
racism, patriarchy, colonization. It's an intersection of
Yes.
things.
There are many things. And, living in a country where we have been sold the rainbow nation so many times, when you talk out on things such as colonialism and racism, you're shunned, you're othered. Because it's like, the question is always, how long are you going to blame those things? And the thing is, it's all systematic. Systems were put in place so our people behave a certain way. Just recently, I was looking at a documentary about Dr. Basson, and he basically put like drugs into our streets, and he had all these plans for Black people, Black women, and you kind of think of those kinds of systems, and you see them out at play now and what they've done. We then can't deny the role of GBV and how that was systematically used against us as a people.
So in 2019, the shutdown march by Black Women Caucus, right? What happened? And I mean, what's your take on that? But what should change so a movement like that doesn't stop there?
South African women grew tired of the ongoing daily violence that became a thing for our women in this country. And I think we got tired of authorities not saying and doing much about it. The presidency not saying and doing much about it. Parliamentarians not saying and doing much about it. All it was just policies. I mean, it's really all policies, and there was no action behind it. So you have these amazing, brave group of women who decided to put on this march, and the march was effective in that it did what it had to do, right? I mean, they even coined this phrase, #fund the fight, where they said to the JSC and JSC listed companies, they gave them a list of things that they believed, could help scourge the fight of against GBV if they were funded. And I remember last year was the 5-year anniversary, and they put these things up, that these lists that they had initially sent out to corporate, and they were like, you said as corporate you would deliver on 1, 2, 3, 4, yet you still haven't, and why haven't you done that? And I was in conversation with one of the ladies from Black Women Caucus recently, and she was saying to me, Luthando, we march, but after marching, other work has to now happen. So grassroots levels, they are doing the things. There are many organizations in this country that work at grassroots levels with things regarding to GBV, but they're not fully funded, and they're not funded well, because unfortunately, some of our departments at times, service delivery, it goes by the wayside, and we don't put people first. And we put self first. And we don't put people first. The work that needs to be truly, truly done, it doesn't get done. And with also that being said, I believe that sometimes, in fact, most of the time, I believe that the reason why as South Africans we don't do much about GBV is because it benefits us as a country somehow. Because what I know about my country is that the people who are whistleblowers, the people who are the activists, the people who speak out on injustice and wrongdoing are women. Now, if you kill off the women, whether it's spiritually, whether it's physically, you kill the soul of a nation. You kill others who want to make a difference in their kids' lives. So then you have no one questioning authority. You have no one questioning anyone. And then there's certain people and forces that can continue doing their will in our country, because they know that if you kill the spirit off, you're done off with this country. And for me, I think that's where it breaks my heart, because we are a nation that marches for everything. When we are upset, we march, we take to the streets. But there has been only this one major march, and there hasn't been anything like that ever since. And I don't recall anything like that prior to that big, of that magnitude. Besides campaigns that were done by Charlize Theron in the past, she did GBV campaigns, Soul City campaigns, the various foundations have their own campaigns. But at that magnitude, where they bought the country, they bought the stock exchange to a standstill, I haven't seen that. And, it makes me question why. Why don't we see that anymore? Why don't we see that kind of unification amongst women?
You know, these marches, when it happened, honestly, in South Africa, it inspired a lot of movements across the continent. And now seeing Kenya and like the movement against femicide, it's also inspiring. I think like when these movements happen, maybe we need a Pan-African, Pan-African movement. When these happen at the same time, they do shake things up, right? They do, as you said, like make things stand still. And I think that's when our governments will realize this is an emergency, like everything has to stop, which is why it's a shutdown. So, I mean, are there any, how do you think we can move from here? What's the missing from a feminist movement today when it comes to really making a change? What do you think learning from that march, that this is what we should be doing moving forward, so we don't, it's not like an ad hoc in one event, and also these movements not just doing grassroots work, but not keep pushing the bigger picture, right? So what can we learn and how can we do better?
So what I've learned in the past couple of years, also being involved with a variety of other women's organizations and wanting to learn and understand how some of the organizations work, and their mandates. The one thing I've learned and noted is that as women, we do not sing the same song. If as women we sang the same song and we sang it in harmony, and so here's the thing that we need to understand. South Africa is, our problems as women are not homogenous, for one, So you have a variety of stakeholders representing other different stakeholders. But my true belief is that if we came together, organization by organization by organization, and we came as one, all of us, and there was kind of like one single mandate as to what are we doing as a nation for women, what are we doing as a nation for children, and what are we doing as a nation for our people in general, as women, not as women from the ANC Youth League, not as Women's League, not women from DA, not women from this party, not women from civil society, but
not politicized,
in general, young and old,
not divided.
Yes, coming together. That is when we will start to see changes. But until such time, we are scattered in silos, doing the work in our corners, which is great and it's commendable because it's not easy. But until such time we actually come together and sing the same song in harmony, we're not going to see much change.
So tell us about the amazing and incredible work you're doing with the Bold Women Network.
So the Bold Women Network, then this makes me happy. The Bold Women Network makes me happy because I felt like I had found a place where I could be myself. And I could be accepted, and this organization could be accepting of everyone and all women. And we were not necessarily, we didn't have stringent rules on who comes in, who we interact with. Our mandate was to empower all women, starting from women in low-end jobs to, to middle earning women in management, going up the ladder, C-suite politicians. And what we've done is we make sure that we work with public sector, we work with private sector, we work with NPOs and NGOs, because why are we leaving other people behind? Why are we being exclusive? It's that exclusivity for me that's a problem. It's the leaving people behind for me that's a problem, because then we're not all moving forward together, and joining Bold Women Network for me was that, because before it was Bold Women Network, it was Bold Ambitious Women. And Lerato Kadiaka met me at a proudly South African event, and she's like, please can you do PR for my event that I'm having, Bold Women Marketing. And I was like, oh, for sure. And after the success of that event, she came to me and she's like, I actually want to change organization to Bold Women Network, and I want you to come and join me as a co-founder. And ever since then, we've been working together, uplifting women within the different sectors, technology, advocating for them, technology, sports, communications, health, We've launched Women in Health series, Department of Health in our province, in South African Gauteng. Work closely with the MEC of Health, and we work with women in, like I said, in various institutions and organizations, public and private sector, and we work with students. And currently, we're running a campaign called Donation for Campaign for Courage and Dignity, where we are collecting pre-loved clothes, stationery, baby products and goods for women and children displaced by GBV. Because there's a lot of these women that are displaced in these homes, and unfortunately, these homes don't have capacity because they have been on waiting lists.
Do you have any shout out to specific women advocates or survivors who have the courage to make a difference?
Definitely, I do. So for me, it's when you talk about GBV and issues relating to feminism and women, it's so broad, So for me, I'll start off one with A Million Girls Foundation. A Million Girls Foundation works with period freedom and dignity. They're trying to keep 1 million girls in school by providing period cups to each girl, because we all know that girls can't go to school because they don't have pads. And pads are expensive to get. So a big shout out to the work that this organization is doing within our country, within our province, and on the continent as a whole. Really, really amazing. And then we have there's an organization called Awaken. Awaken is an organization that deals with sexual extortion and how it affects students and how it affects women in different parts of the continent and the country, and how we don't really talk about sexual extortion or sexual corruption. We just talk about sexual harassment. And sometimes it's not sexual harassment, but it is sexual corruption, and also the GBV in there as well. And, Zakona Mvelase, who's the founder, she's done brilliant work in championing for women who find themselves in these positions, and then at the end of the day find themselves jobless because there wasn't correct policy. Now you're a criminal. You are the crime, the offense was done to you, but because you're involved in a case of corruption, you too are a criminal when you are actually the victim, so they do that. And then another shout out goes to the Disele May Foundation. Disele May is a victim and survivor, but she works with the perpetrators. So she works in the prisons and the prison systems because she used to be a jail warden. So she actually works with rehabilitizing the wrongdoers, and helping them see they're wrong and how they've hurt society and how they can then turn their lives around and turn their ways around in giving back to society. I also want to give a shout out to the Young Leaders Connect, so for me, Young Leaders Connect and IWSA, their activism is so much more different. They're all about financial freedom and empowering Black young leaders with ethical behavior that enables them financial freedom and that enables them to lead ethically, to lead well. This is an organization that was founded by Mamzane Lembeki. In fact, any organization that is affiliated with her, whether it's South African Women in Dialogue, whether it's African Women in Dialogue, whether it's Women's Development Trust, Women's Development Bank, Young Leaders Connect, IWFSA, that on its own has done great work, not only for women in South Africa, but women across the continent. And I just wish more people knew about these organizations. And these organizations I'm talking about, and ones that I previously mentioned, I always say to myself, imagine if everyone had to just come together and just create something, there'd be just so much change. But these are some of the organizations that I am always proud of. And Grit as well. Grit is one of my favorites. They are a tech-based application that speaks to protection of girls. They used to be called Kwanele. And Black Women Caucus, of course. Yes, and Bold Women Network. But these are the organizations that I really love, that are doing well in society and for society, and are just really trying to make a change, not only in their corner, but are involved with initiatives with the United Nations, with the AU and are just trying to do this thing, not only for South African women, but for the continent and globally.
Thank you so much for sharing that list. I feel like you have a longer list. If we were like, oh, let's go with the list, you're like, and. And I love that because I think it's extremely important as women's rights defenders, women advocates in the space to really amplify the work, of other survivors, especially survivors, because it's not easy for an SGBV survivor who is still going through her healing journey to take it upon herself to start a platform to support other women. So thank you for sharing that list. And I'm sure everybody listening will, check them out, collaborate, that's what we need. The message you are, I think, trying to get across is we need to unite. We need to collaborate beyond the silos and do something together and sing one song. So for the next, we have the last two questions. So what is your love letter to all the SGBV survivors listening to us?
Dear survivor, 1, it wasn't your fault. 2, it's okay to feel at times that life is not going to work out. It's okay to feel at times that you are defeated, but do not live in defeat. Do not live in a whirlpool of not getting out, because you get stuck there. And when you get stuck there, life happens without you. And unfortunately, life needs to happen. It needs to occur so we can grow, so we can be better people, so we can do the work, so we can raise our children. And all I can say to you guys is, and to myself, is take it one day at a time. Don't rush the journey. Take it easy. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have good days. You're going to have days where you feel like, the best, the top lioness, and you can do everything. And then there will be weeks, not days, weeks where you cannot do any single thing. You can go to bed. You can't eat, you can't bath, and it's okay to not be hard on yourself, but don't live there. Find something that you believe is worth saving and invest all your energy in that. And I think through helping others and through healing others, you then are able to heal yourself. And through healing yourself, you're able to heal your inner child. And you're able to also reclaim that magic that was stolen from you, that resides in your uterus, in your womb.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that from the heart to all the survivors' hearts. Straight. Takes so much bravery from you. I take so much courage from you today. This has been inspiring. It has been a reminder. It has been grounding. And I feel like, like sitting here with you in community as a survivor as well, that you're not alone. And yeah, you can get through it. Like, I love what you said about singing one song, because you can get through it because of other survivors' courage.
Yes.
That's how you move on.